Even if we do say that Revelation 4 through Revelation 20 links the first century 7 churches of Asia Minor with the climax of the end time new world, new heavens and the new earth, that actually can still mean two different things, and there are two very different theological camps for interpreting Revelation that are going to come to some very different conclusions generally of interpreting Revelation, even though both of them agree that Revelation 4 through 20 is addressing the interadvental age, the age between the two comings of Christ. So let's look at the two things that could mean to say that the bulk middle of Revelation is about this age that we live in. The one that I do not agree with, I'm not subscribing to historicism, although historicism, and not many people do today. It'd be hard to find historicist interpreters today, but it does have quite the history, and especially in Reformed circles, a whole list of people who historicist interpreters, from Martin Luther, commentator Matthew Poole, Matthew Henry. We've looked at him. John Gill, some well-known commentators, Albert Barnes. In fact, through the early Reformation, here it is, almost all Protestant reformers from the Reformation into the 19th century. So for a couple of centuries, this was the dominant view to understand apocalyptic literature, both Daniel and Revelation. Historicism says that, and this might have been what you thought that I meant when I said Revelation 4 links 4 through 20, links 3 through 21. Historicism says that as you march through the chapters successively, as you march through the seals, through the trumpets, through the bowls, progressively, you are moving progressively through history, and so that at each stage in history, you can open up to a chapter or to one of the plagues and identify it in chronological order with one of the periods of history. So if you want to talk about the rise of the Holy Roman Empire, there's going to be some chapter in Revelation. There's going to be some plague probably associated with that time. If you want to talk about the Turkish invasion of Byzantium, there's probably going to be some chapter. So one of the plagues or trumpets pertaining to that time that you're telling the story, the specific story, like a history book. It's basically an encoded. This view would say it's an encoded history book. Okay, you're reading the history of Christianity through encoded symbols. Alternatively, the one that I subscribe to more is called idealism, and even though I'm opening the web page here to Wikipedia as idealism, I really don't like this page. I don't think it represents idealism very well. But just so that you can see that if you want, maybe you can find some references to idealism here. Mounts, are there any good references? I don't really like this page very much, but there is such a thing called idealism in Christian eschatology. And that the book of Revelation is telling the history of the world and of the church, not through a chronological sequence of encoded symbols, but through allegorical principles that apply in different ways at different times. So we have allegories. We have Christian allegories, the three best known: Pilgrim's Progress, Chronicles of Narnia, Lord of the Rings. And you can identify with different aspects of these stories. You can say, "Oh, I know what it's like to pass through Vanity Fair and Pilgrim's Progress. I know what it's like to be so enticed by by the Turkish delight of that the Queen of Winter offers me that I will betray my siblings for it. I know what it's like to be so enraptured with the ring of power that it has addictive control over me. But the things that happen in those stories don't necessarily chronologically match up with every person's, and different people are in the world are going to be at those stages of their life in different times. And that's why I think actually idealism is a better fit for the church age than historicism is, because whereas Israel's history is more of a monolith, or what would the word be, a dialith, that when the kingdom is split into two parts, but Israel's history is the history of one nation. The church is spread abroad through the nations. You not only have Orthodoxy in Byzantium, you have Catholicism and later Protestantism in Europe. You have the Nestorian Church of the East from Persia across Asia for many centuries, and different thing. And then with the rise of global missions, you have things going on in South America, the sub-Saharan Africa, and East Asia, the rise of charismaticism and evangelicalism, as well as Catholic missions and Jesuits spreading to the ends of the earth. And it gets so diverse. Wildly different things are happening in different parts of the world at different times, and it becomes much harder to speak about the history of the church if you're not just focused on one aspect. Sometimes a church history book will just be focused on Western European church history. That's easier to tell as a chronological story, although even that has countless branches to it. But if God is concerned with the whole global, all nations, ends of the earth church, then what's happening with Christians in China at one point could be very different from what's happening with Christians in Brazil. And even that's too broad of a, since we don't have a centralized, there's not one. I mean, in the First Kings, if Solomon is building the temple in Jerusalem, that is the center point of attention of what God, Jerusalem and the temple in Jerusalem is the center point of attention of what God is doing in the world, because that's his house. But if all of the churches, the truly spirit-endowed, spirit-empowered churches, if the temple of God has now been dispersed equally to all the churches, and there's not one central location like Jerusalem was in the Old Testament, then God is doing a variety of different things, in different places at different times, and you can't just tell that story as a monolithic, consecutive story. And so idealism is helpful. It's just like Jesus's parables, and this is one reason why I think, again, why idealism is fitting, is that an allegory is just an extended parable, and we know that Jesus spoke in parables, and we know that the book of Revelation was given through Jesus, so it's fitting for him to speak in parables. And when Jesus told a parable of the four soils, when he told the parable of the leaven, of the mustard seed, of the wheat and the tares, it's going to find the gives you a framework that is going to be applicable to different people in different situations in different ways at different times. But the framework itself is universal. It gives you the categories of thought, so that then you can look at my situation right now and say, oh, I identify with the rocky soil, because the principles are in place for interpreting what's happening in your situation. So from an idealistic framework, I think that, and I'm not the only one to subscribe to this. That's why idealism, I want to show you, it has its own Wikipedia page. It's one of the four major hermeneutical frameworks. Historicism, futurism, preterism, and idealism are the four major frameworks for interpreting the book of Revelation. So idealism, folks who adhere to the idealism framework believe that these symbols, these parables, these stories in Revelation give us the tools that we need to then look at any point in space-time, any particular time and place in the interadvental age, and have a framework for interpreting what are the principles that God has given us for understanding what is heaven's view of what's happening on earth.